controversy surrounding one of the most celebrated and beloved evangelicals in history.
There are two great mysteries in Sister Amiee's life. One is the healing ministry. What really was going on in those healings?
There were many cases where people came in ambulances and went home on the streetcar.
The other great mystery is what happened to Sister Amiee during the period that she disappeared.
I'm A.J. Benza. Join me as we revisit the life and times of Amiee Semple Mcpherson. Was she an angel sent down to spread the word of God, or was Sister Amiee a charlatan who scammed with salvation? In the early 1920s, Hollywood was a boom town filled with aspiring showbiz hopefuls. But one woman who arrived here in those days had her sights set on a much loftier goal. Amiee Semple Mcpherson wasn't some wide-eyed glamour girl hoping to be discovered. No. Sister Amiee came with a mission: to save souls, heal the sick, and build a temple where her ever-growing flock of devoted followers could take refuge. L.A., the city of angels, had never seen anything like Sister Amiee before, or since. But how did this modern-day Messiah ever find her way to Tinseltown in the first place? Sister Amiee was born Amiee Kennedy on October 9, 1890, in a small town in Canada. Amiee was the only child of devoutly religious parents. Daniel Mark Epstein is the author of Sister Amiee.
One of Sister Amiee's first influences in her childhood was her mother's working with the Salvation Army, which was, as you know, an evangelistic organization. Sister Amiee was growing up in a very, very religious atmosphere.
Amiee was not quick to embrace her mother's religious zeal. Amie's daughter, Roberta Salter.
When Mother was in high school, she began studying evolution, and she began doubting the Bible stories that she had learned from her mother. She was seriously thinking of becoming an atheist.
But at the age of 17, Amiee experienced the first of many revelations while on her way home from school with her father.
Riding home, she passed a place that said Evangel Services, Irish Evangelist. She says, "Oh, Father, let's go and see." I hear the peculiar people. When the minister, Robert Semple, spoke and preached, she felt he was speaking right to her.
He had wonderful dynamism in the way that he spoke, and she fell in love with him.
The romance blossomed for several months until Robert received word from his church that he was being sent to China as a missionary.
Mother said, "How wonderful." He said, "Will you marry me and go to China with me?" And Mother said yes to Robert and yes to God.
They sailed off to China with high hopes. When they got there, the two of them got very, very ill.
A few months after the Semples arrived in China, malaria claimed Robert's life, leaving Amiee a widow at age 19.
Robert died at the time of their second anniversary. And a month later, I was born.
With her baby daughter, a grief-stricken Amiee Semple left China. She moved to New York City, where her mother was working at the Salvation Army headquarters. While living in New York, Amiee caught the eye of a young man.
As a young widow, she was ruled by Harold Mcpherson. She told him that she was called of God to preach the gospel, and that she shouldn't be settling down. He promised if she was ever called again, he would let her follow her calling.
In 1912, 21-year-old Amiee agreed to marry Harold. 1 year later, the couple had a son, Ralph Mcpherson. It was soon after Ralph's birth that Amiee got that call from heaven she'd been expecting, Amie's son, Ralph Mcpherson.
She preached her first sermon, and as she preached, people were so taken by that, they came and said, "Could you come to our town and preach the gospel?"
So Amiee left her husband Harold at home and hit the road with two small children in tow and God as her co-pilot. She and Harold separated in 1917 and eventually divorced.
Sister Amiee was probably the first woman in history to drive from coast to coast in an automobile without a man on hand. They called it the gospel car, and on one side of it, it had a sign that said, "Jesus is coming soon, get ready."
For almost 3 years, Sister Amiee saved souls along every highway in America until the Lord called her to Los Angeles, a town with no shortage of lost souls. Just ahead, Sister Amiee becomes a Hollywood darling, and we'll learn the real story behind Amie's mysterious disappearance. Was it a publicity stunt, a kidnapping, or were there darker forces at work? On January 1st, 1923, after 10 years of preaching and proselytizing in Los Angeles, Amiee Semple Mcpherson opened the Angelus Temple. The new home of the International Church of the Fourth Square Gospel was a 5,300-seat, state-of-the-art theater. Amie's followers came from every walk of life, from down-and-out drunks off the street to Hollywood royalty. Douglas Fairbanks, Jean Harlow, and Charlie Chaplin were just a few of the celebrity regulars who came to hear Amie's sermons. She was, without a doubt, the biggest star in town. But Amiee wasn't on the payroll at Columbia or Paramount or Warner Brothers, no. The toast of Tinseltown was under contract to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
All of the actors and actresses who were interested in the power of stage presence would go to Angelus Temple to see Sister Amiee preach.
Philip Goff is a professor of history at Cal State Los Angeles.
Charlie Chaplin often showed up there in disguise, and he was famous for saying Amie's show is the best show in town, and it's free.
Part of Amie's success was that she understood the new power of Hollywood. Movies were taking people away from the church.
She decided to fight fire with fire.
She began to do what she called illustrated sermons, which were really little stage shows.
Makes me think of Daniel in the lion's den. Speaking of Daniel in the lion's den, seems to me I hear someone coming now. My word.
Those illustrated sermons were so popular, in fact, that Amiee printed tickets to avoid overcrowding. The tickets, of course, were free of charge.
Soon those tickets was being scalped. Much to Mother's horror.
On one occasion, Sister Amiee entertained a group badly in need of salvation.
Amiee was teaching one day in the temple when suddenly the doors opened in the back of the temple and in came all of these people in hoods. It was a whole chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. The next morning when they were cleaning up in front of the temple, they found a number of hoods and sheets in the bushes from these Klansmen who obviously had given up their robes for another way of life.
Amiee was successfully turning thousands of people to God every week. But Sister Amiee was looking for ways to reach a broader audience. She found her answer on the radio.
In 1924, she was offered the chance to purchase a license for a radio station in Los Angeles for only $25,000.
Amiee Semple Mcpherson was the first woman in the world to own her own radio station. Raymond Cox attended the Angelus Temple and was a close friend of Sister Amie's.
She was greatly criticized. People said, Satan is the prince of the power of the air, and you're using the devil's methods to preach the gospel.
And here she was taking something that they thought was evil and incorporating it into the religious service itself. By the time she gets the radio license, she is not just ministering to the 5,500 people in each service, but rather she's ministering to up to 1 million people over the radio.
36-year-old Amiee Semple Mcpherson was at the height of her fame and success. But on May 18, 1926, Sister Amie's life took a very mysterious turn.
Emma Schaefer was her secretary, and Emma and Sister went down to Ocean Park.
Sister Amiee went for a swim, and she was swimming pretty far out, and Emma Schaefer went to get a glass of orange juice.
The Sister ventured out into the ocean 2 or 3 times, and when Emma came back the last time, Sister was gone.
They got the horrible news the mother had been drowned in the Pacific Ocean.
Up next, had Sister Amiee been called home to heaven without a trace? Was this some elaborate publicity stunt? Or was Sister Amiee a victim of foul play? We'll examine those theories when we come back. By the mid-1920s, evangelist Amiee Semple Mcpherson was one of the most celebrated and beloved women in the world, not to mention the toast of Hollywood. But on May 18, 1926, 36-year-old Sister Amiee vanished without a trace during a swim in the Pacific Ocean. Her disappearance caused panic and mayhem. Thousands converged on the beaches of Santa Monica praying for Amie's safe return. One diver drowned during the frantic search. A distraught member of Amie's flock even took her own life so she could accompany Amiee into the hereafter.
Her disappearance and the probability that she had drowned became a subject of enormous concern to the citizens of America.
After weeks of searching, Sister Amie's body was still nowhere to be found. Some speculated that Amiee ascended straight to heaven, but others believed her disappearance was nothing more than a cruel hoax, the mother of all publicity stunts.
The people who were already detractors really went after her at this point, saying that she had run off with someone, that she had duped her followers, taking their money.
But there was no money missing from the church. Sister Amiee's bereaved followers finally decided to hold a memorial. Thousands of mourners attended the service. Then rumors of kidnapping suddenly began to surface.
There were 2 ransom notes that were delivered to the temple. One asked for $25,000 for her return, and I think the second one asked for $500,000.
But 6 weeks later, on June 23, 1926, Sister Amiee miraculously reappeared in the Arizona desert.
We got a telephone call that she was in Arizona and had been found. That was a joy.
She walked in out of the desert with a horrible story of having been kidnapped from the beach 6 weeks before, having been held captive in a shack out in the desert, of having been burned with cigarettes and tortured in other ways. A very distraught couple came to her on the beach and said that their child was very, very ill, and would she please come and lay hands on the child. She went out to the car, which was waiting. She was seized. They slammed the door and they drove off.
Sister Amiee claimed she was taken to a small town in Mexico called Agua Prieta, just south of the Arizona border. But Amiee was determined to escape her captors.
They said they were going to get some supplies, and she managed to roll off the cot where she was tied up and roll over and saw off the ropes that held her wrists, and on a big can with jagged edges. She stumbled into Agua Prieta and then was carried across in a taxi cab to Douglas, Arizona, where she was hospitalized. And triumphantly, there were 50,000 people met the train that brought her home.
Amie's triumph was short-lived. The L.A. District Attorney wasn't buying the kidnapping story. He wanted to charge her with corruption of morals for staging a hoax. A grand jury was convened to investigate. Sister Amiee, however, was undaunted. She had work to do.
The important part of the story is that through all of this, Mother never lost her courage. She'd come home, wash her face with ice water, take away the tears, put a Bible under her arm, go back into the pulpit.
Raymond Cox has spent 25 years investigating Sister Amiee's disappearance.
I have read all 3,000 pages of the preliminary hearing transcript, and the DA were trying to break down her story and trying to put her in a bad light, and they failed. When the grand jury was asked to indict, they wouldn't indict anybody.
Mother was unable to prove she'd been kidnapped. The district attorney was unable to prove that she hadn't been. That was the bottom line. And he finally asked for the meeting to be closed for lack of sufficient evidence. That was that.
Rumors persisted that Sister Amiee's kidnapping was a ploy. She was even accused of staging the event to go off and have an affair. But these rumors were never substantiated. So the question remains, who would want to kidnap Amiee Semple Mcpherson?
In the early years of Evangelist Temple, many bootleggers and drug dealers got converted, and she let them testify over her radio station, and they would name the names of police officers who were being paid protection. There'd been threats that she would be kidnapped if she didn't lay off the underworld.
And why wouldn't the authorities at least investigate these allegations?
The district attorney and the police were out to get her because they'd been cut off from income that they got from protection rackets.
Like they say, follow the money. And how's this for poetic justice? The district attorney who tried to send Sister Amiee up the river ended up in the slammer himself, incarcerated at San Quentin for bribery. And guess who visited the prison to pray for his soul? Amiee Semple Mcpherson. Up next, the other mystery surrounding Sister Amiee. Was she a true healer, or was there something else behind the miracles Amiee performed? Amiee Semple Mcpherson survived the scandal of her kidnapping unscathed. By the 1930s, Sister Amiee was still enjoying enormous popularity all over the world as an evangelist with the power to heal the sick. But Amie's critics continued to dog her. Were these healings nothing more than trickery, or was Sister Amiee divinely gifted?
I had to do a great deal of research into the reports from people who had been healed, and I began doing interviews with some of these people who had memories of this. or who actually attended these extraordinary healing services. And I was amazed by what I found. Many of the people who went to Sister Amie's services were healed, and were healed permanently.
In Angela's temple, there were 5,000 people praying with her for this individual. It was as though a magnifying glass of prayer was focused.
She just would pray for the sick. She'd anoint them with oil. There were many cases where people came in ambulances and went home on the streetcar.
But Sister Amie's critics were convinced the healing miracles were a hoax.
The healings were so remarkable that the American Medical Association sent representatives down to get some sense of, if there was any sort of fakery. And they sent representatives who watched the healings, and they were as amazed as the journalists were, and they admitted that this was authentic, that they couldn't explain it, but they said that it was wonderful. That was the word that they used, wonderful and beneficial.
Our mother always said, and there were some spectacular events, she said, I am not the healer. God is. He's the great physician. I am the little girl, the receptionist, who said, the doctor will see you right away.
California physician Dr. Thomas L. Davis has his own theory about faith healings.
Faith healings, in my experience, are not common, but you get down to a small percentage where the healing sticks, where people who should be dead aren't dead.
This woman approached the altar rail, and Sister Amiee saw that the woman wanted some sort of special healing prayers. And this was a woman who was so badly crippled with rheumatoid arthritis that she had not been able to walk in some time. She was able to walk away, and eventually she was quite normal.
Part of you goes, oh man, it's really sad. It's too bad they're reaching for those really extreme things, because medicine can't help them, anything we know. And then a part of you says, do it, Lord. And from the things I've seen, certainly a lot of it may be not real, but certainly some of the results may well be real. I mean, very real, scientifically real.
Well, you be the judge. In 1944, after decades of evangelical service, Sister Amiee traveled to Oakland, California to preach at a revival meeting. It was during this trip that Amiee Semple Mcpherson finally met her maker at the age of 54.
Her death was really completely unexpected. Her career, I think, was in a lot of ways on an upswing, and she went for this revival up to Oakland, and she went back to her hotel room and she couldn't sleep.
The doctor had given her some sleeping pills because she was having keyed up from working so hard.
The official report was that she died of a heart attack induced by an accidental overdose of sleeping pills. It's odd that she could pray for so many people and they were healed, and yet she wasn't healed.
Amiee Semple Mcpherson died on September 27, 1944. After a memorial at Angela's Temple, she was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale, California. Amie's son Ralph remembers his mother's service.
At the funeral, there were over 35,000 people came by to pay their last respects. The procession out to the graveyard Forest Lawn was lined with people all along the sidewalk.
Some newspaper people have said that Amiee was a bit flamboyant, that she preached in brothels and dance halls and nightclubs, as if this was something pretty awful to do. There used to be a bank robber. When he was asked, why do you rob banks? He said, that's where the money is. And that's what Mother said. That's where the sinners are, and that's where she preached.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sister Amiee sure hit pay dirt when she came to L.A. The Angelus Temple is still thriving today, and the International Church of the Fourth Square Gospel has millions of followers in nearly every country in the world. Say what you will, Sister Amiee deserves her place in history. I'm A.J. Benza. Join me the next time we take a look at the saints and sinners in a state of mind called Hollywood. Angels,